Good afternoon and welcome everybody. My name's Russell Gerber and of course such a pleasure to have you here today on the Africam show brought to you by explore.org. Once again, we'll be checking out the live cameras, see what we've got around, what we might have coming down to the waterholes across the cameras across the country. Touching on a few of our highlights from the week, things we managed to capture on the cameras that some of you might have missed. And as always, I'd love to hear your questions and comments. So please do send in those on the YouTube question feed. You'll see it in the live box, and I'd love to interact with you for the next half an hour or so. We've got the beautiful views here from Waterholes River where we've started. Of course, live views of the river. As I touched on last week, we've seen quite a drop in the water level over the last 6 months or so, which is pretty typical. Doesn't seem to be, or don't seem to be any real action around at the moment at Waterholes. Looks like a couple of Impala on the other side of the river there. I'm sure many of you know Impala easily the most commonly spotted antelope species across the cameras. A very common antelope in southern Africa. Really well adapted to this environment, both grazing and browsing. Mixed feeder, as we would dub them. So they're able to do well throughout the year. Most of the females will be pregnant around about this time and looking to drop babies. Generally around November or December, you start to see the young Impala lambs getting dropped. Just generally coincided with the beginning of the wet season, so we'll be hoping for another great rainy season. Things looking very dry across the cameras, across the country. And a quick hello to Maria, who says she's looking forward to another great presentation. Thank you, Maria. And Marjorie Wood, good afternoon. Hope everything is well in Cornwall. As I said, not too much action at Waterholes right now. Let's head on over to Tau. We've had a lot of action around there. Many animals hanging out in the very dry Ekwe region. Not a lot of water available, so the animals tend to concentrate around the permanent water sources. Don't forget to keep those questions coming in, folks. So it's always a pleasure for me to chat to you. Vanessa Sinclair asks, what part of South Africa is this? So, Vanessa, we just left Waterholes River camera, which is course, in the Greater Kruger National Park. We've moved over to our Tau camera now. This region is on the border between South Africa and Botswana. Reserve known as Madikwe. Angela asks, where are we? As I mentioned, so all the cameras are based in South Africa. Many of them in the Greater Kruger Park area, in the Baluli Game Reserve. Then, as I mentioned, here in Madikwe, and then, of course, the one in Tembe Elephant Park, which is in KwaZulu-Natal. Angela says she's heading to Victoria Falls in Hwangi, which is, of course, in Zimbabwe. A wonderful game viewing area as well, Angela. I'm sure you'll have a great time up there. You can see a couple of wildebeest cruising through the very dry and barren area around the waterhole at Tau. Of course, a lot of the grazing has been stripped by all of our various grazers over the last few months since the wonderful green season. Try to pronounce your name here, Andy FLC. Would Impala cross the river or stay on the one side or the other? Andy, they will very much avoid crossing the river as much as possible. They will sometimes walk through in areas where it's dry or very shallow, simply to get to another site for grazing or browsing. But if there's a deeper body of water, they will avoid that swim. Of course, they know the dangers of crocodiles, potential danger that they face if they were to swim across. What you do sometimes see is some antelope will run into the water when they feel under threat. Animals like waterbuck here in South Africa, and if you go up to northern Botswana, animals like red lechwe, sitatunga, which are water adapted antelope species. They often use the water as a refuge, but that can get them in trouble too, running away from terrestrial predators only to end up in the mouths of the aquatic predators, the crocodiles. So I hope that answers your question. And on the topic of crocodiles, that brings us to our little quiz for today. Let's see if you guys have got your thinking caps on. Today's question is, how long can a crocodile stay underwater? How long can they hold their breath? So let me know what your thoughts are, and we'll come to the answer towards the end of the show. And for now, with these wildebeests and a couple of Impala rams in the foreground, I think let's dive into our first highlight from the week. This was a lovely little clip taken at Naledi camera. This was caught 4 days ago, 3 or 4 days ago on the cameras. We can see really cool interaction with two very different species. It's Africa's largest mammal, the African elephant, and Africa's largest rodent, the porcupine. You'll find elephants often don't like sharing the water holes, and they'll often chase away animals that might be around when they arrive. Generally, there's not too much competition between the porcupine and elephant, but as I say, elephants can be quite grumpy at times for no particular reason. Sometimes they really don't want any other animals around, and other times they're much more tolerant. But generally speaking, it's pretty cool to see that sort of interaction between a nocturnal species and what is generally a diurnal species in the African savanna elephants. Really cool little clip. We had a question as well. I've seen earlier we did get some rhinos on the camera, and from time to time we do see rhinos on the cameras. They do, of course, exist in the wild areas where our cameras are. What you would have noticed too is we often then take the cameras away from viewing the rhinos. It's a bit of a challenge when it comes to the anti-poaching efforts. The anti-poaching teams at the various locations where our cameras are. So we try not to show the rhinos so that we don't give away the locations of those particular animals, even though it would be very difficult for a potential poacher to, in real time, actually be able to take advantage of that situation. But in the interest of being cautious and careful, we tend to move the cameras away from any rhino viewing. So might answer some of your questions about why we don't tend to keep the cameras on the rhinos. If you are interested, do pop over to the Care for Wild Sanctuary Cam on Explore as well. You can check out wonderful views of the rhinos in the sanctuary there. Thank you for your question. We're back live, of course, now. Looking pretty quiet on the cameras, so we're going to dive right into our next little highlight, which was pretty exciting. It's our Tembe lions really keeping us interested on the Tembe cams. We've seen a lot of hunting activity in and around that Tembe waterhole. You can see in this clip lions stalking a nyala and waterbuck. You see the waterbuck in the foreground and nyala female in the background. Just give you a minute to watch carefully and enjoy this incredible sighting. You see, we didn't quite manage to capture the entire thing on the cameras, but you see now, it looks like a young male lion, sub-adult, who managed to catch this nyala bull. You see now the arrival of the rest of the pride. What's interesting is that it was taken by the young sub-adult male. Most of the kills, certainly in the last 6 months or so, have been completed by the mom, collared mother, easily identifiable here at Tembe. She's had these 3 sub-adult cubs hanging around her, the 2 females and the sub-adult male that I just mentioned, but really good to see the young male finishing off a kill on his own. Bodes well for them when they'll have to start helping Mom with the hunting. And of course, in the not too distant future, that young male will have to head out on his own and establish his own territory. But a really, really cool sighting nonetheless. Not something that we get to capture on the cameras all the time. So keep your eyes on that Tembe camera. As I say, we've seen lots of good hunting action in that area in the last few months. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we have a lot of animals concentrating around the waterholes this time of year. Just because of the lack of water in the reserves, so it's often plays into the hands of the predators. They can almost hang around these permanent water sources, waiting for the antelope species to come down for a drink and take advantage of that moment of weakness for them. And though it does look very dry on the cameras, it's really nice to have the advantage of the cameras being at these water holes where we get to see a lot more animals and concentration of animals in these areas, and generally a lot of interactions between species. And as I said, while things are still nice and quiet, let's head on over to our next highlight. This was a lovely little clip from Olifants. We're live at Olifants now, of course, but let's cross over to our highlights of these baboons. And the baboons often like hanging around the Olifants River. You can see here, troop itself often will be seen together. Almost always, when you see one baboon, you'll see many more. You'll see the female in the background there with a tiny little baby. See that pink little face sticking out from time to time. Looks very young, I would say, less than a month old. Baboons are very, very caring mothers, certainly. The males not so keen on the rearing of the young. Their main role is to protect the troop from other invading big mammals. And of course, you'll have a number of different sentries, normally the males, who will be sitting raised up in the trees around them, keeping an eye out for any potential predators. And you'll hear that fabulous alarm call of baboons, which sounds almost like a dog barking, warning the whole troop of any potential predators. And one of their big enemies, of course, is leopard. But they will alarm call for other big predators like lion as well. So nice to see that tiny little baby and capture them on the cameras. Those baboons have been spending a lot of time around the river in the previous months. They've moved on for the time being. I think there's a few more fruiting trees away from the river now, but they were roosting in the fig tree across the other side of the river for the last few months. Looks like they're spending most of their time in other parts of the reserve now. We got a little comment from Sue. She says, an amazing virtual show. I've just found you, but I'll follow you from now on. Thank you, Sue. It's great to have you with us. Spread the word. Let your friends know and come and join us. We can spend some time in the bush together, enjoying the beautiful cameras. Of course, we're back live now checking out Rosie's. We're just starting to get the sun dropping lower in the sky and start getting the beautiful golden light across the cameras. But on the live cams this afternoon, everything looking a little quiet. It's not unusual. From time to time it can happen. Everything is live on the show, so we never know what we might get. Anything can come down at any time, so that's what is always pretty exciting about the African bush. While we're waiting for any potential arrivals, let's have a look at another one of our great little highlight clips from the weekend. This is of a beautiful lioness at Tau. And of course, you can find all the cameras here on Explore, all the various channels. On the show last week, we chatted about the various lion prides that we do see on the cameras. This female, we think, is from the Chaba pride. You can see she's got quite a saggy tummy. Suggests she may have been lactating in the not too distant past, but sometimes can actually stay that way permanently. But an easy way for us to identify her, and that's why we think she is a lioness from the Chaba pride. But a short little clip. We don't see her that often on the cameras. A nice little treat for us to catch her having a drink. But just a stark reminder that you can catch just about anything happening on the cameras at any time, particularly those of you all over the world who will be watching the cameras overnight. It's around 4:23 p.m. in the afternoon here in South African time, so just getting into the late afternoon, early evening. You can see these golden colors starting to show up here at Rosie's. Let's head on over to Tembe. We haven't actually popped over there just yet. Let's see what we've got hanging out at the Tembe Waterhole. So such a beautiful sight in the late afternoon. You can just see the last little glimpses of some golden light touching the waterhole at Tembe. For now, it looks like our little lion pride is not on show. Have a little look around, but it looks like all is quiet at the Tembe Waterhole as well for now. I think it'll give us some time for another little highlight. This one was really cool. Fairly common sight across the waterholes this dry time of year. This was of a Nile crocodile having a lovely catfish lunch at Tau. It's actually filmed yesterday. You can actually hear the crunching of that crocodile chowing down on what looks like a sharp-toothed catfish. This is very much a time of plenty for the crocodiles, able to capture all these fish species, various fish species that forced to use up less and less of the space available as the water dries up, and there's just not much water left for them to survive. So the birds and crocodiles, that yellow-billed stork that we saw looking through picture in the first shot, all of them very happy to see the water drying up to a certain degree. You can see the crocodile making short work of that catfish. Many people are not aware that crocodiles, majority of the time, do actually eat fish and not the big game that we see in the very popular wildlife shows. They will when they get the opportunity, if they can, but for the most part, they will go for fish species, particularly in the dry season like this. Another sight we might catch again on the cameras if you keep your eyes peeled. You might see the demise of a few more catfish over the coming months. As we watch these brindled gnu walk off into the sunset, it's time to give you guys the answer to our quiz today. So how long can a crocodile hold its breath? And Marie says not long enough. That's a good question, a good answer to the question, I think. Andy says about 2 hours. Andy, not too far off. Just over an hour is what is the maximum recorded time for a crocodile holding its breath. Remember, they're able to slow down their metabolism and actually concentrate oxygen to the most important parts of their body as required, which is an incredible adaptation, allowing them to stay hidden very long periods of time, particularly if they're not using up much energy. But thank you for your cooperation, taking part in our little quiz. And a quick hello to Sandra and Jackie. Glad to hear you're enjoying the show, everybody. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you. As I said, one of my favorite things, hanging out in the bush, checking out the live cams. Some really cool stuff that we caught on the cameras over the weekend. I hope you enjoyed those few highlights as we look at this little plains zebra. Looks like he's making his way down for a drink. We've still got a few months left of this very dry season. As I mentioned, rains generally only arrive around November or December, barring the odd shower here and there, but for the most part, as you can tell, very dry over the winter months in this part of South Africa. Looks like we got an elephant arrival in the background as well. So with that arrival, it's time for us to say goodbye. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for today, but I hope you enjoyed our live show. We'll be back again next week at the same time for the Africam show. Of course, our Africam for Good show will be back on Thursday, so please do join us then as well. But thank you, as always, to everyone for joining us. It's been my pleasure. I'll see you all again soon. Cheers for now.